Ekonomi dunia telah mengalami kemajuan pesat selama 2 abad terakhir. Di abad ke-19 dan 20, ekonomi global melonjak 100 kali lipat. Populasi dunia diproyeksikan mencapai 9 miliar pada awal 2040 dan dengan pertumbuhan sekitar 2% per tahun, ekonomi diprediksi akan berlipat ganda setiap 2 dekade. Namun kemajuan ini bukan tanpa tantangan. Krisis iklim dan kemiskinan yang merajalela menuntut solusi inovatif. Untuk itu, pendekatan pembangunan berkelanjutan atau sustainable development perlu menjadi kunci. Pendekatan holistik ini menyeimbangkan pertumbuhan ekonomi dengan pengentasan kemiskinan dan pelestarian lingkungan. Dengan demikian, trade-off antara kebijakan yang mendorong pertumbuhan dan kebijakan yang melindungi lingkungan dan masyarakat dapat diminimalisir, bahkan dihilangkan. Optimalisasi sumber daya manusia, inovasi, dan teknologi adalah kunci untuk mempercepat pertumbuhan berkelanjutan di tengah krisis iklim dan kemiskinan. Pembiayaan berkelanjutan atau sustainable finance memainkan peran penting dalam mendorong ekonomi berkelanjutan sesuai dengan prinsip ESG, yaitu Environment, Social and Governance, atau aspek lingkungan, sosial, dan tata kelola secara terpadu. Industri jasa keuangan, khususnya perbankan, memiliki peran krusial dalam mencapai tujuan pembiayaan berkelanjutan dan transisi menuju nol emisi. Selain menyalurkan pembiayaan berkelanjutan, perbankan dapat menjadi agen perubahan dan katalisator dalam mendorong nasabahnya untuk mengadopsi praktek yang lebih ramah lingkungan.
Planet kita sedang menghadapi sejumlah tantangan besar, yaitu perubahan iklim, berkurangnya sumber daya, dan meningkatnya kesenjangan. Tentu kita perlu menemukan cara untuk hidup dan bertumbuh tanpa mengorbankan generasi mendatang. Nah, disinilah konsep pembangunan keberlanjutan memiliki peran vital dalam menjawab tantangan ekonomi global saat ini. Lalu dari mana kita harus memulainya? Saya berkesempatan untuk bertemu dengan seorang ekonom Amerika Serikat ternama yang juga dikenal sebagai salah satu pakar ekonomi pembangunan dunia untuk membahasnya, Jeffrey Sachs. Berikut perbincangan saya. Insight with Desi Anwar kali ini wawancara eksklusif dengan Profesor Jeffrey Sachs, seorang ekonom senior terkenal di seluruh dunia dan juga seorang profesor dari University of Columbia. Jeffrey, welcome to Indonesia.
Thank you.
So great to see you.
Great
so
to be back.
And great to be back. A familiar face. And well, tell us about your visit this time to Jakarta and to this part of the world.
I'm here in Asia to visit here in Jakarta, to visit KL, there to talk about next year's ASEAN meetings and the general economic situation.
The world is an interesting place,
yes.
Isn't it? Full of challenges. Since you're everything, especially an economist, Jeffrey, I'd like to sort of have a more sort of philosophical approach to the idea of not just the economy, but money itself. They say that money makes the world go round, but this is what we have. Tensions, poverty, inequality, global warming. So how do we get where we are?
Well, our problem is we have all of these challenges, but we are not making the solutions that we should be making. So the big challenge in the world today is how can we govern ourselves so that all this wealth that has been generated, all these technologies that have been advanced, serve the human purpose, end poverty, reduce inequality, help kids to get an education, address the climate crisis, rather than sending us deeper and deeper into conflict between rich and poor, between China and the U.S. All of these great challenges are really governance challenges. How do we behave properly in the world? I spend almost every waking hour thinking about these issues because I have been working for and with the United Nations for more than 2 decades now, or for 3 secretaries general of the UN, and we have a very important meeting coming up at the UN in September called the Summit of the Future. Very unusual, but it's exactly to address all of the issues that you just mentioned. What are we doing on this planet so we can avoid disaster and we can find our way to real solutions to the list of challenges that you mentioned. And I'm looking forward to that meeting, and part of the purpose of my trip is to speak with government leaders about that so that we actually arrive in September with some thoughtful ideas and with the governments primed to find solutions.
Share with us some of those solutions. I mean, money should be the solution, not the problem, right? But you said if it's a question about governments, so why is there sort of a gap between, you know, the policies and the implementation and what we're doing with the global finance?
Let me put it this way. Everybody in the world would like to live decently, to live well, to have enough to eat, to have good shelter, to have social protection if some bad thing happens to them, or some kind of weather shock and so forth. Everybody would like to live in peace. So at the UN we talk about the future we want. In other words, what are the goals? And the goals have been described as sustainable development, and that's a term that many people have heard by now. SDGs. It means SDGs are the specific 17 goals that every government, Indonesia, United States, Russia, China, everybody agreed to in 2015. And sustainable development means good living standards, social fairness so that it's not the rich versus the poor, environmental sustainability so that we're not heating the planet to disaster, which we are doing right now, and peace. So those are the 4 objectives. That's the future we want: prosperity, social justice, environmental sustainability, peace and cooperation. So why aren't we getting it? Well, that's where we have to think and understand, what do we need to do? How do we need to change? The good news is, and everybody knows it because we're all living it together, technology, the tools that we have are just moving forward so incredibly fast that we should be able to solve all of this. Take the question of energy. We know we need renewable energy, for example. Well, solar power, which is going to play a big role in the world's future, in Indonesia's future, in America's future, was 100 times more expensive than it is now. It's come down to 1/100th of what it cost just 20 years ago. That's great. We should be able to solve all of this. So it's an example of better tools at hand right now. So we can do so many things now, transforming the energy system, making agriculture much more productive, using all of these digital technologies, making our cities more pleasant, less traffic jams, better able to get around, less spending time in endless commutes, because now we can divide our work sometimes from home, sometimes from a coffee shop, sometimes from an office. So many, many things can be done. But yet, what are we actually seeing in the world right now? Major wars. 2 huge wars. One in Ukraine, one in the Middle East. We're seeing huge tension. Everyone in Indonesia knows that the US and China are in a spat, and everyone's saying, my God, please behave yourselves. And this is where I think diplomacy and problem solving is absolutely essential. So as an economist, I spend a lot of my time saying, look, all we have to do is do this, 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 and this, and we could reduce or end poverty, we could get all the kids in school, we could have a better energy system. And then the government say, well, yes, but you know, it's not so simple because I have a big donor. They want to continue to do this, or my industrial lobby says they want to continue to do this, or what if we do this, but then China is going to become more powerful than the United States. And all of these obstacles, many of them self-inflicted wounds, I would say, because they don't really stand up to scrutiny. And so what I'm hoping and looking for is that if we think, if we reason, if we logically look at problems, if we have diplomacy and dialogue, what looks impossible right now or just incredibly dangerous can actually be turned towards solutions. And I lead for the UN group called the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. So I love the word solutions. I love the word network because it means global interconnection. And the concept of sustainable development, that's my flag. You know, that's what I always say, which is economic, social, environmental, peace.
ESGs, yes.
That framework. So this network is an idea that I developed together with UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon when he was Secretary General a dozen years ago. The governments had just said, we'll have goals for sustainable development. They became the 17 SDGs. The Secretary General and I discussed the idea of creating a network of think tanks and universities around the world to work on these challenges. First, what should our goals be? And then second, how do we solve them? So now we have 2,000 universities. University of Indonesia is one of the members. We have a network throughout Asia that's very, very active in Cambodia, in Thailand, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in China, Japan, Korea, and so forth. So the network covers the world. It's got 150 countries represented in the network, and it's got about 2,000 universities, and I'm seeing something quite encouraging, which is young people at university want to solve these problems, and the universities want to work on them, which is actually very, very good. Now the universities are even being ranked, as in many of these global rankings, in part on whether they're working on the problem solving, whether they're teaching sustainable development, whether they're engaged in the sustainable development challenges. So that's good. The universities are running, saying, how do we get more involved? So this is the approach that I believe in. We have the goals, but we don't have the solutions yet in place. And I'm working with problem solvers all over the world, including in Indonesia. Indonesia has taken a lead on one major piece of this puzzle, which is the financing, something that you mentioned. How are governments going to pay for the energy transformation or for sustainable agriculture? And the idea that's really come out of Indonesia is what we call blended finance. Which is
we have the G20, the Bali Global Blended Finance Alliance.
Exactly. That started here. That's now a global movement based in Bali. How wonderful. Because everybody gets inspired by Bali. And the idea is to use new techniques for finance so that even poor communities, poor villages, remote places have the means to say, yes, we can have solar power, we can have sustainable agriculture, we can protect our forests, because finance is key. It's wonderful to talk about all of these things, but if you don't have the money to make the investments, forget it. One of the first countries actually to say, oh, that works, we can put this into our framework was Indonesia. Bappenas, the planning ministry, did a wonderful job. It was here, was the first time that I was presented as special advisor to the United Nations Secretary General on these goals with a government structure that said, we're going to do it.
Yeah, and then we have the money, but then if you don't have the right policies, you don't have the right governance, then also that's why we end up where we are.
And what I love about the UN, and it's unique, is at least everyone has to listen to each other. Everyone has to talk to each other. I find it a little bit magical. People are cynical about it. Well, it's a talk shop. But talk is actually a lot better than war. And when you talk, you have to take into account someone's talking to you, they have their interests, they have their solutions, Now, what can we do together?
Okay, but the question is, how long will the talking go on? And I'm curious because you do still have faith in the UN, but I've been following SDGs since it was Millennium Development Goals. So that's
I was there too.
It was like almost 25 years ago. And the goal is actually 2030, which is actually just around the corner when we look at the perspective of things. And I mean, to be honest, I mean, the UN, we did stuff during the pandemic, you know, and trying to get everybody together to deal with COVID-19. But there's areas, for example, particularly on geopolitical issues, that the UN's not really, you know, that influential enough. Now, in terms of the effectiveness and also the target for 2030, these solutions, can they really be implemented, you know, with that kind of speed and collaboration, especially when we have a changing of administration coming up in all these various places, including the US and Indonesia, and what's happening in, you know, with Russia, Ukraine, and then China and everything.
So these particular 17 SDGs were set and voted on unanimously on September 25th, 2015. And then a few weeks later, December 12th, 2015, they gavelled the Paris Climate Agreement. So within a few weeks, two major sets of goals were adopted. And I said, oh, great, let's roll up our sleeves. We have 15 years, let's hurry.
15 years.
And of course, nothing happened. I would say 17 goals. Governments looked at this and said, what are we going to do? This is so complicated. How does this fit our budget? What does this mean? One of the first countries actually to say, oh, that works. We can put this into our framework was Indonesia. Bappenas, the planning ministry, did a wonderful job. It was the first time that I was presented as special advisor to the United Nations Secretary General on these goals with a government structure that said, we're going to do it. I took the Indonesia plan all over the world, say, look, they're doing it. So Indonesia played a very lead role.
It was a Bali roadmap, I remember.
Exactly. But then, you know, most governments first couldn't quite do it. Second, the finance was not there. Then came COVID, and COVID was a disaster for the world. We're still not exactly past that disaster. That in itself
there could be more pandemics
is a long story. But just to say, major disruption. And then by the time we were getting out of COVID, war in Ukraine, and if that was not bad enough, huge US-China tensions. If that wasn't bad enough, then came the war in Israel and Gaza. And this has been horrible. I've had the chance to testify twice to the UN Security Council in the last 2 years about these issues. I said in my testimony, and I think I was right, and I was analytical, and I said to them, because those are the 15 countries responsible for this under the UN Charter, you can solve these wars, you can end them now because they have reasons. They don't just come out of the blue. The Israel-Gaza war is because there's no state of Palestine. This is clear. There's no rights of the Palestinian people. We need a state of Palestine. I said, make them the 194th UN member state now. Don't delay. Okay, that's an example. We need to have some respect between the major powers. Where are the tensions between the US and China coming from right now? Two areas. One, China's become big, successful, powerful. I say great.
That's it's a big country.
1.4 billion people,
Absolutely.
and the living standards have gone up, and I've spent my professional lifetime watching that happen from 1981 onward. My first visit to China was 43 years ago. China was impoverished. I've watched the growth. I've worked with the government. I've trained a lot of Chinese students who are now senior officials. I'm delighted with China's rise, but in the United States it's viewed as, oh my God, they're a rival for us. I say, get over it. It's good that China's prosperous, but the specific crisis right now is, of course, over Taiwan. And the problem there is the United States is butting into China's internal affairs, and it should not do so. So my message to the UN Security Council was, behave. give some space. Don't get the whole world involved in superpower spats. Be prudent. Be careful. Don't go right up to the other one and try to put your nose into their business. My main recommendation is we all calm down, take a deep breath, and work on the things that we should be working on together. ASEAN with 660 million people, that's a big deal. This is a very important region for the world economy. And Indonesia hosts the Secretariat. Use it. This is an opportunity to help guide the world.
Okay, so this is where Indonesia maybe we can come in. We have, the ASEAN chairmanship, and we have the G20. How do you see? I mean, you come to this part of the world quite often, so you must see us as some kind of at least a beacon of hope.
I think
Jeffrey,
it's,
perhaps message for the new government. What kind of torch should they be bearing?
It is a truism, but it also happens to be true that the world economy is shifting to Asia. So this is very important, the center of gravity. I mean, there's an economy everywhere, but this is more than half the world in Asia, and it's the dynamic part of the world. And we have dynamism in China, of course. We have dynamism throughout ASEAN, including Indonesia having steady 5% growth. And I think things can even accelerate and improve here. We have India now, probably about
1 billion
20 years behind China in some sense in that rapid advance, but now in a rapid advance stage. Boy, that's good for the Indian Ocean if everyone remains peaceful. You've got a lot of dynamism here, a lot of application of the new technologies, a lot of advances of infrastructure. You have fast rail in the U.S. I'm still praying for fast rail. We have no fast rail. I had to get off.
We have one.
I had to get off my Amtrak train from Washington to New York last week because the train stopped because the track broke down. This is the corridor between the U.S. and Washington, so we don't have this. But ASEAN has this, Asia has this. The Belt and Road Initiative is a very positive initiative because China's saying, let's use 21st century technology to get connected. Wonderful idea. So Indonesia within this scheme, Indonesia is the 4th most populous country in the world. That's a big deal. Your G20 was a big deal. The initiatives on blended finance are a big deal. ASEAN with 660 million people, that's a big deal. This is a very important region for the world economy. And Indonesia hosts the Secretariat. Use it. This is an opportunity to help guide the world. Also to say to the United States and to China, get along, please. We like you both. We can cooperate. We do not choose sides. We don't need to choose sides. And you guys don't even have to have a spat, because that's absolutely the truth. And so I think Indonesia has a huge diplomatic role to play.
We've always been part of the non-aligned movement. We never choose sides unless we're forced to.
And I think ASEAN's extremely important because for every practical thing that Indonesia needs to do, for example, clean energy, we know there needs to be a transformation. That will be easier if it's done at the scale of ASEAN than if it's done simply within Indonesia itself. So thinking regionally will really help on the problem solving. Of course it will help on the diplomacy, it will help on the global voice. So I want to see Indonesia's leadership making ASEAN very strong. I want ASEAN to play a major global economic role, sustainable development role, and diplomatic role. That's one of the reasons I'm here.
Well, I think we're pretty good at creating big events, coming up with roadmaps. We've got lots of roadmaps and signing up to agreements. We have our own ambitions to reduce our emission. But the proof is in the pudding. It's in the government. We have this ESG, the environmental, the social and the governance. Part. I just want to ask the two parts of it. The policy aspect is obviously very, very important into the governance. We have to have good, clean governance. How can Indonesia improve on that, particularly for the new administration? What do they need to kind of checklist? And the other thing is the appetite for business. Obviously, at the end of the day, that's where the money is, and that's. Do you see businesses, adopting ESG, and are they, through their own kind of volition, not because it's imposed by some top-down approach, but because sustainability is a key to the success and the profitability of businesses in the long run?
Well, first, you used a word that I use every day, many times a day, because I think it's incredibly important: roadmap. A roadmap is how do we get from here to where we want to go. And there are two different things that societies do and that governments do that are very different from each other. One is a vision. You could have a vision, Indonesia 2045. Where does this country want to be on its 100th anniversary of independence? Great, very important. Where do we want to go? But a vision is not a roadmap. A roadmap is how actually to get there. And my main recommendation to any government, including the incoming government, is be very serious on making that road mapping. Get your best experts, get your universities, get your specialists, use Bapinas, use all of the mechanisms you have, so that you're not just talking about the nice things to do, but how are we really going to do it? And a roadmap has many pieces to it, so it's also not a simple thing. It is, first, what technologies are we going to use to get to where we want to go? Second, what investments do we need to make to upgrade maybe the skills of the population, maybe the physical infrastructure, but what investments? Third, how are we going to pay for all of that? That's a big ticket item. That's expensive. It's not cheap to transform the energy system. It's not cheap to transform the agriculture system. It's not inexpensive to build infrastructure. It's got to be financed. So the finance question becomes absolutely central. To my mind, a roadmap is essential for putting the technologies in place, putting the investment profile very clear. Business will do some part, government has to do another part, and then the financing issues, this blended finance, the private sector part, the public sector part. So I want to see from Indonesia, what's the roadmap to decarbonize the energy system? Not just the goal's fine. What is actually the roadmap? Where is this country going to get its power from? Is it really solar? Where's the solar going to be installed? Do you have the land to do that? Should it be nuclear? If so, is that safe? Where could it be? How many power plants? Is it from Chinese technology? Is it from US technology? Is it from Russian technology? What are the real plans? Because time is short, and even though 2045 may seem like a long time away, in policy making, it is the blink of an eye. It really is the blink of an eye, because by the time you get done planning the siting, doing the engineering, mobilizing the financing, getting the construction done, we're pretty far along.
Unfortunately, governing is a 5-year thing. That's a short-term aspect of it that doesn't help with
for me,
sustainability.
the key, and this is one of the hardest parts for the politicians, is you can't think only or even mainly in 5-year intervals. You can't say, I'm in government, what's my budget next year? Let me get through this to the next crisis. No. What is our roadmap to 2045? My thesis would be for this incoming government, do the homework, take the vision, take the roadmap, figure out what's needed, and I'll bet that you need more revenues than you have in your budget right now.
The financing is, I feel that there is, we in the G20, and we've had all these, forums on the financing aspect. There seems to be, businesses are beginning to catch on to this. What's your thoughts? I mean, this idea of the blended finance.
I can tell you what's actually happened, which is a huge increase of investments in renewables, but overwhelmingly in a small group of countries, the rich countries, and China. So if you look at the data, there's been a boom, hundreds of billions of dollars per year more of renewables. but it's the U.S., Europe, and China, and a few other places, not Indonesia, not Western Asia, not Sub-Saharan Africa, not Central Asia. We got diverted by geopolitics, we got diverted by COVID, we got diverted by a lack of the right financial institutions, a lack of serious problem solving. We got diverted, of course, by lobbying, by a lot of...
Yes, absolutely. At the end of the day, money talks when it comes to politics, right?
Yeah, but yes, and we could say, well, it's always like that, but when we're dealing with a global crisis like we're dealing with, we can't play games the way we normally play games. Politicians have children, they have grandchildren, they need to respect the future.
Like you mentioned, there is actually a lot of money out there, isn't it, particularly in the private sector. It's not that the world is lacking money. It's
well,
not that
let's just be clear with some numbers. The world output is more than $100 trillion per year right now, measured at just normal market prices. If you measure it at what we call purchasing power, it's even higher than that. 100 trillion is not small change. Even for a macroeconomist, it's not bad. We save something like 30% of that, consume the rest. But savings are therefore about $30 trillion a year. Okay, we need for this transformation $3 or $4 or $5 trillion. It's a fraction of this large saving. We have the money to do it. We have the financing to do it. We have to make the roadmap real. So that's the main point.
And diverting it to where the money is actually needed, which is in this
huge
part of the
problem,
world.
and it's the one that I've, by the way, been dealing with. You could say, well, why don't you have solutions, Mr. Sachs, after all this time? But from the first days of my research as an economist more than 40 years ago, I've been dealing with the question, how do we make that large pool of global saving actually get directed to the problems of poor people, not just the benefits of rich people? The truth is, we still have a global financial system that the money flows to those who already have it, not to those who need it.
Richer.
But it's not impossible, because we have so many cases, so many examples, so many ways to make the money move to those who really need it. A simple example that everybody knows about. We have what we call the multilateral development banks. It's a mouthful, but it's the World Bank, it's the Asian Development Bank, it's the new Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB. It's what's called the New Development Bank in Shanghai. We have all these institutions. What they do is they go to the capital markets and borrow, and then their job is actually to lend to the poorer countries. And they can lend on good terms because they can borrow on good terms. So an obvious point, very obvious, is that what that group of banks does should be scaled up 5 or 10 times. So again, in the G20, Indonesia is going to be there in Brazil. Brazil's the presidency now, just like Indonesia was a couple of years ago. Indonesia, India, South Africa, Russia, other emerging economies need to say no more delay. Come on. It will work, by the way. It really would work if the vast majority of humanity, which is about 6.8 billion people out of the 8 billion on the planet, raise their voice in unison to the 1.2 billion in the rich world and say, stop. You used to run the world, you don't run the world anymore. We run the world together, you got to do your part. This is what we really need to hear.
The appetite for businesses themselves, have they evolved beyond just business creating profit for their shareholders into something else, like, we talk about impactful, businesses that actually, worry about the community, how they actually make a difference. Do you see the business world moving in that direction, or are they still stuck in this let's put the money where the best return of interest
Well,
is.
look, I mean, the smart businesses are looking forward because that's where the market's going to be. So they're thinking ahead. You look at China. China has become, because it worked hard at it, now the clear, I think, indisputable world leader in electric vehicles. We are going to be driving electric vehicles in the future. Or maybe we won't be driving them, maybe AI will be driving us, but we'll be riding in them. We're likely to be riding in Chinese vehicles for the next 20 years because BYD and others have become the low-cost, high-quality producers. How did that happen? Well, they didn't say, I'm going to stick with the past. They said, what's coming up? China worked on it. The United States dragged its feet. You know, in the U.S., we had our politicians saying, oh, we don't need that renewable energy stuff. We don't need to change. So the U.S. companies were too slow. We had one good one, Elon Musk and Tesla, but which is heavily a Chinese company, actually, because he produces in China. But in general, the politicians said, don't, you know, we don't have to go that way. That's the environmentalists and so forth. So the incumbent companies didn't react. Now what's happening? Now the United States is in a full panic. Oh my God, China's going to take over the world electric vehicle market. We have to protect our markets. Europe is putting up protection as well. So the smart companies are ahead of the curve. The ones that are lobbying and telling governments don't move and it's too hard and so forth, they're trying to hang on. They're not going to be the ones making the big bucks in the end. So smart companies absolutely are already looking forward. Our problem is not the lack of entrepreneurship. The problem is not that businesses are dragging their feet in looking forward. The problem is that some incumbent industries, the old ones, fossil fuels, like in this country, the coal sector, that's a sector that's going to actually shrink because that's what the world needs to have happen. But they don't want that, of course. But the role of politics is to find the ways forward that really work, not just to balance the forces of who's giving campaign contributions and so on. It is to solve the problems.
Blended finances, a blend of what, and how can that be applied in order to give some of that money in this direction?
Blended means two things. It means literally when you do a project that some of that funding is going to come from official or government sources and some is going to come from the capital markets or the banks. It's going to be bonds or it's going to be a bank loan, so that when you look at the structure of a project, you're going to see both kinds of capital on the balance sheet. It's going to be solutions that involve this rather more complicated mix of sources. But what it also means is not only the way that things are financed, but the way that projects or initiatives are actually done. Because if this country is going to convert to, and it has to zero carbon energy, private companies will play a big role because you'll have private power generation for sure. But the government's going to have to play a big role also, because I guarantee you those distribution lines that are going to carry the power from whatever solar field or wind or nuclear power plant to the population center, that's going to either be state-owned, probably a state utility, or it's going to be heavily regulated by government. So you can't do it just on a market basis. So both the financing and the design are a mix, and that's what blending means. Now, what it means practically for Indonesia is it's true that public money isn't going to do the heavy lifting for a lot of things, but there's not enough public finance right now. Indonesia has a relatively low amount of tax to national income. Even the taxes that are on the books don't get collected all that well, let's face it.
Around 11%.
So there's a lot of tax evasion, there's a lot of revenue that should be collected that is not being collected. the revenues as a share of the national income is estimated by the International Monetary Fund to be about 16%. That's way too low. Because this government has a big responsibility. You look to the government, oh, you want school feeding? Well, it has to be paid for. You want schools? It has to be paid for. You want
health?
You want teachers that are qualified? You better pay them a decent salary. You want a health system? Thank you. You don't want that flood or that drought killing your community? Thank you very much. You want physical infrastructure? You want digital connectivity? Okay, part of that can be paid for by the private sector. But what about poor communities? They're not going to be digitally connected unless the government does it. So when we talked about roadmaps, a big part of the roadmap is what does the government actually have to finance? My thesis would be for this incoming government, do the homework, take the vision, take the roadmap, figure out what's needed, and I'll bet that you need more revenues than you have in your budget right now. Now, what are you going to do about it? Either you're going to collect more taxes now, or you're going to put in place a sequence of revenue raising over time. So maybe it starts very small now, but in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, it's not 16% of GDP. Maybe it's 20, maybe it's 25%. I don't want to pull a number out of the hat. I want to link it to the actual roadmap. I want Bapinas to say, this is what we're really going to need so that in 2045 we are where we at. And then the politicians, we don't like that, but this is what we need to do. This is our homework assignment.
Okay. Professor Jeffrey, thank you so much for insight, and I hope, you know, definitely Indonesian, the new administration will listen. So if we want to fulfill our ambition to be what we call the golden Indonesia by 2045, the China model is actually a much more effective model, isn't it? So
Indonesia's going to make it. Let me give you a prediction.
We will make it.
Yes, absolutely.
And we can just copy paste from
No.
existing success stories, or we can create.
Nobody copies and pastes. Everyone looks around, studies what's working, says how does our culture and our society do the best for us, but learning from the others.
But why are you optimistic that we will make it?
Yeah, it's a wonderful country, and I really believe it's going to make it.
Okay, let's hope you're right. And let's hope we're still going to be around to see it.
No, that for sure. That's what we got to work on. For the big boys, calm down, stop. We want to be there. We want the future. We want to build.
Yes, again, thank you so much for your insight. Ya, demikian Insight with Desi Anwar kali ini. Terima kasih banyak juga atas perhatian Anda. Sangat menarik ya tadi diskusinya Insight dari Profesor Jeffrey Sachs.
So our vision is to be the best bank for a better world. That means that we see that the bank has to be different. The bank has to have a strong sense of purpose. The bank needs to do well and do good, and even better, do well by doing good.
Anda masih bersama Insight with Desi Anwar. Seperti yang kita ketahui, negara kita yang kaya sumber daya dan potensi, Indonesia menghadapi tantangan dalam mencapai pembangunan berkelanjutan atau sustainable development dan juga pengentasan kemiskinan. Dan dalam diskusi saya sebelumnya, Jeffrey Sachs mengatakan bahwa peta rencana yang konkret atau roadmap ini merupakan kunci dalam mewujudkan visi Indonesia 2045. Dan Jeffrey juga menyebut bisnis yang hebat akan memandang ke depan karena di sanalah pasar berada. DBS Indonesia sebagai lembaga keuangan terkemuka menyadari hal ini dan juga berkomitmen untuk memainkan peran penting dalam implementasinya. Lalu seperti apa komitmen Bank DBS Indonesia menyelaraskan upaya keberlanjutan dengan strategi bisnisnya? Sudah ada di studio bersama saya Lim Chu Chong selaku Presiden Direktur dari PT Bank DBS Indonesia. Chu Chong, how are you?
I'm good. Hello.
Jeffrey Sachs, great man, economist,
Yes.
very passionate about Sustainable Development Goals and also about ESG. He's quite, I think, as an economist, he doesn't just sort of go for the old capitalist and market economy where profit is the most important thing, the bottom line and shareholders' value. But you have to go beyond that. Yes. You have to do things sustainably and have a positive impact, not just to the shareholders, obviously, but to the stakeholders as well, the people, the community, and doing businesses responsibly, which I think is what, DBS is doing, responsible business practices. And just share with us, your thoughts on how to integrate the sustainable SDGs, the goals, Sustainable Development Goals, and nowadays, ESG, environmental, social, and governance aspect into the banking business itself, and how can it be implemented so that the impact can actually be felt in a very concrete and real way?
Well, DBS believes that there's a higher purpose in banking. So our vision is to be the best bank for a better world. That means that we see that the bank has to be different. The bank has to have a strong sense of purpose. The bank needs to do well and do good, and even better, do well by doing good. So we believe that the time to take action is now, so that we can create some impact to have a more inclusive and sustainable future. So to this end, you have heard that DBS has committed through the foundation another 1 billion Sing dollars over the next 10 years to see how we can dial up support for vulnerable communities and all that. But also within DBS, there's a framework to adopt sustainability into the whole franchise. We run it in 3 pillars. We have the pillar of responsible banking, which is the pillar that we work hard on helping our clients to transit. We do transition advisory, we do sustainable financing, green loans, sustainable bonds, all that, whatever it takes to take our clients through this period. We also have the responsible business practice, where we integrate sustainability principles into the franchise. I think the simple things will be solar panels, how to save paper, but I think the more important thing that we felt was training our people to have that awareness, to know what to do, to walk the talk. Because I think this whole effort is not just teaching people, it's also how do they catch the vision and doing things, volunteering and all that. Is, like we say, is both taught and caught. Then we have the pillar 3, which is impact beyond banking, which is where the foundation comes to solve some of the wicked problems. In Indonesia, we'll look at things like income inequality, social divide, and all that. So we have these 3 pillars, and internally we run an internal sustainability council that we use periodically to track progress, to make sure that we do what we say that we will do, and we learn how to make an impact. And when things don't work out the way we think it should, then we course correct. And that's how DBS as a whole try to make a difference, to be a different kind of bank, and how we incorporate sustainability into our business strategy.
The top is this, business with a purpose, which is a much higher purpose, and impact beyond banking. It's not just, the numbers, but it's also making a difference in people's lives. Tell us a bit about, some of your plans in sort of implementing this, beyond banking business, so to speak, the impact beyond banking.
We currently have 2 projects in Indonesia. One is an existing project where we work with Decoding Foundation. We run a training course for the people in vocational institutes, because we noticed that this segment, in terms of learning institution, this segment is the one that has kind of double the unemployment rate. So we have developed this program. We're already doing it, and we have touched maybe 100,000 people already.
100,000?
Yeah, but we're
across Indonesia?
Across Indonesia. And we are dialing up this program this year to do a longer course. So it will be 900 hours of training in IT, coding and all that. And above and beyond the training, we are also trying to arrange for internships to do placements for them into companies, so that these beneficiaries can rise up and take on IT jobs in Indonesia.
Yeah, which is important, you know, the reskilling.
Important for the development of this country.
Yeah, especially
so
with the age of AI and also,
yes.
you know.
So this is one of the projects we are on this year. And another new project we have just got approval is this project that will work with Asia Foundation in West Kalimantan. This is to work with marginalized women. They could be farmers, they could be housewives, they could be women running OMKM. So we are working with them on financial literacy, giving them the education and eventually helping them with financial access, so that they can be part of the community and they can be part of the public decision making over time. So these are the two projects we are trying to do in Indonesia to address this thing about the income inequality, the growing social divide, and we hope to make an impact with these two projects.
Okay, and this is going to be a long-term project, obviously. It's a long-term
These are all
commitment.
over the next 2-3 years.
Okay, in terms of implementing it, how, you know, tell us a little bit. I mean, how do you choose, and what are the sort of the challenges, as well as, you know, do you have in your DBS themselves facilitators or people equipped, because this is a different thing to just, you know, doing banking, but now you are entering something which is in a much a bigger sphere, which is changing people's lives at the basic level.
Yeah, for these two projects, we will of course we went through selection criteria and made sure we work with reputable partners for the first two big projects. And internally, we of course will get our people to be involved somewhat, but these projects are actually run by our partners. Internally, we are actually looking at other possible projects and getting our people to send out feelers and to see what we can contribute from the bank's point of view. I think I'm personally passionate about whether can the bank make a difference in financial inclusion, because financial inclusion is kind of like by the side of a bank. This will be important. The other very important part that we want to focus on is this thing about sustainable financing, because we think that as a bank, if we can extend the advisory and financing to projects that can advance Indonesia, advance the energy transition, advance sustainable development, that is where we feel that we can bring in our expertise, not only in Indonesia but across projects that we've done in the bank, and to benefit Indonesian companies.
What's in it for the bank, or what's in it for you? Because, you know, you can just do business as usual and nobody's going to sort of penalize you, and you maybe can have, you know, some of your CSR program, but why do you think it's important for DBS to do something which is beyond banking?
Back to what I was saying, because I think that we want to be a different kind of bank. We think that banking has a higher purpose. It's not just about doing well financially. It's how we mix that with doing good. And the case that we want to get to is our vision, to be the best bank for a better world. It's not just about normal banking.
Yeah, well, which I think it's great, because I wish, you know, more companies should actually start thinking in this direction, because at the end of the day, sustainable, you know, doing things sustainably is good for the business itself.
Yes.
In the long term. After the, you know, the program is West Kalimantan, you know, what sort of target are you hoping to get, and what kind of job or skills as well as opportunities that you would like to see the people benefiting from the program?
I think for the West Kalimantan project, we hope to reach as many marginalized women as possible. And I think a test will be how many can we help to get financial access. And for the decoding one is how many people can we help to get permanent employment and see their careers grow. So that is what will be meaningful for us for these projects.
And you'll be also working with potential employers of these people.
Yes.
I mean, this is something that, you know, part of the plan.
Yeah, that's part of the plan, because this is not something the bank can do by ourselves. It's with partners, ecosystem, other stakeholders, and that's where I think we will find a lot of meaning. And we will not stop here. I think we'll be looking for other possible projects to do, because the 1 billion commitment that the bank has just made just started from this year.
And this is 1 billion for the
10
next
years.
The next 10 years, so there'll be more and more of these programs ahead of you. And so far, the environment for doing this type of thing, do you find, you know, there's a great excitement? Do you have presumably you also need to work together with the local government and with, you know, the regulators.
Yeah.
Do you find good support and people
Yeah,
share
I
your
think for
enthusiasm?
the West Kalimantan project, together with Asia Foundation, we need to work with the local governments for sure. And even for our core business in sustainable financing, I think OJK has also clarified the taxonomy, and they have got rules and regulations around that. So we are all moving in the right direction.
Okay, so you're quite optimistic.
Yeah, so hopefully we can work together to make this a better world.
I think it's interesting that the world is beginning to wake up to the fact that it can no longer be doing business as usual, but you do have to be seen as contributing in a positive way towards, you know, particularly the environment where you do business, right?
I actually believe that this, whatever new normal, will be business as usual as we go ahead. It's not just about profit making, but it's also making the world a better place.
Yes, and actually SDGs, our target is 2030, which is not that long.
Yeah. We're near.
Chu Chong, well, thank you so much, and thank you for that, you know, insight. And I wish you the very best. And I think it will be great if one of these days, when we can see in West Kalimantan what it is that you're doing and the kind of impact that the program is making to the local people. Financial inclusion, of course, is very important, and also poverty alleviation. Is extremely, you know, crucial, as well as empowering the people.
Yeah, we're looking forward as well.
Yeah, okay. Once again, thank you very much. Dan demikian Insight with Desi Anwar kali ini. Jangan lupa, Anda juga dapat menyaksikan tayangan ini di cnnindonesia.com dan di YouTube CNN Indonesia Insight with Desi Anwar. Sampai jumpa. Stay safe. Bye-bye.